Hey finders, and welcome back to Fortune Finds. Today I'm going to be teaching you all of my tips and tricks on how to make sure that your foundation doesn't end up patchy, muddy, cakey. We're going to make sure that our foundation, the base of our face, lays on nice and smooth and stays that way all day long. I recently got into a pretty detailed conversation with one of my subscribers. No matter what she does, her foundation just ends up looking weird and kind of takes a muddy turn, kind of gets a little cakey. There are so many possibilities as to why one's foundation can end up looking cakey and muddy and just leave anyone feeling a little disheartened at the end of their makeup routine. Before we do go ahead and hop into it, I just want to remind you that if you are not yet subscribed, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. So scroll down below. If you're not sure if you're subscribed, if the button is red, that means that you haven't subscribed yet. And I would really greatly appreciate it if you would click that button and make it gray, become a part of my little Fortune Finds family. And if you would like to receive a little notification every time I am uploading a new video here on my channel, make sure that you click the bell button right next to that subscribe button. So without further ado, I have a ton of tips, tricks, and advice to give you. So let's go ahead and hop right into the video. All right, guys, now while there may be an array of reasons as to why your foundation and overall base of your face is laying on a little bit cakey, there are two things to really keep in mind. And that is to one, always be very gentle with your skin. Never be harsh, because if you're harsh with your skin, that's going to create like an abrasion and it's going to uplift any texture on your face. And number two, which is just as important, is to make sure that you are applying very thin makeup layers with minimal amount of product. So be gentle with your skin and only apply as much makeup as you need. So in terms of skincare, now I know you might be thinking, well, Fortune, we're talking about my foundation not laying down right. What does that have anything to do with my skincare? Well, surprise, your makeup might not be laying down nicely because your skin might not be in the right spot. It might be because you have too harsh of a skincare routine, or maybe you're lacking a good skincare routine altogether. So first and foremost, I think it's really important to exfoliate your skin. It's going to go ahead and take off any of the dead skin cells that are laying on top of your skin. And it's also going to kind of unclog your pores. So seemingly it's going to create a smoother base for any and all of your makeup to lay down on. Now, if you are someone that has very, very sensitive skin, which I myself, I have very sensitive and dry skin, sometimes exfoliating my skin can leave my skin really red. And the last thing we want to do is go in with extra makeup in order to cover and combat that redness. So for me, if I know I'm going to be going in with a full face of makeup the next morning, the night before, I will go ahead and exfoliate my face. I would also recommend applying an oil to your face the night before, whether you have oily skin, combo skin, dry skin, it doesn't matter. It's going to absorb into the skin. It's going to make the top layer of your skin softer, smoother, more supple, and more hydrated skin helps to fill in any fine lines. So again, it's going to help any makeup on top lay down smoother, less patchy, less cakey. Now, the next morning or before you're going to go ahead and start your makeup routine, it's really important to wash your face, cleanse your face. This way there is nothing on your skin. I like to use a gel cleanser just because that's really gentle on my sensitive skin. And again, it's going to stop any redness before going in with my makeup routine. Are you someone that has to go in with a makeup primer? If the answer is yes, and every time you do your makeup, you have to use a primer, I would recommend going in with your primer with no skincare underneath it or very minimal skincare underneath it. So maybe use a light layer of serum and then put the primer on top of it. I'm going to suggest not putting on a moisturizer and then a primer, because those are very rich products and it can cause your makeup to move throughout the day. So just try this. If you go in with a primer and that's it, and you realize that your skin feels tight and dry throughout the day, by all means, the next time that you go and try this routine, try a little bit of a skincare routine underneath it. But again, nothing too thick, nothing too heavy. You need to really take this process step by step, because again, there are so many factors that can really go into why your makeup is laying down cakey. It's going to take a little bit of trial and error, but just follow along, guys. I promise you that you can pinpoint what the problem is, and I'm going to help you to pinpoint it and correct it. Now, it's really important to pick a primer that is right for you. So if you have oily skin, I would recommend a mattifying primer. And if you have dry skin, I would recommend a hydrating primer. Just because a product is labeled primer doesn't mean that's the only primer you can use. You can go ahead and use your daily moisturizer as your primer, because it's really going to get your skin supple and ready, and it's going to provide that little bit of tackiness that your makeup needs to really sit on your face all day long. So don't be fooled. For those of you who really, really love a moisturizer, moisturizer, don't be scared to just put a moisturizer on and then go in with your makeup. In terms of moisturizer though, I would definitely use one that is not fragranted and has a very thin consistency to it. I really like the Tatcha water cream. It's very, very thin on the skin. My skin sucks it up and it's not fragranted. So again, it's not going to go ahead and create those red spots on my face that is going to need to be covered up by makeup. A bit of that moisturizer, and I'm going to rub it between my fingers to really thin out the product, warm it up, and kind of give it a thinner consistency to it. Now I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to press this moisturizer or primer, if you do choose a primer instead. I'm gonna press this into my face. Notice how I'm not swiping. I'm not rubbing it in my face aggressively. That's going to cause either redness, irritation, or it's gonna pick up any texture on your skin and bring it to the surface. Now, I would give that about 5 to 10 minutes because the more time you give your skin to absorb that moisturizer, leaves less of a layer on top of your skin. Let's talk about foundation. Now, I think it's really important to use a liquid foundation, especially if you are someone that is encountering cakey problems. The thinner the foundation, the runnier the foundation, the better in my opinion, because it's going to lay down thinner and it's not going to cake up as much throughout the day. Use a medium to full coverage foundation. Now, just because you use a high coverage foundation doesn't mean that you're going to look cakey. The higher the coverage is, the more likely you're going to use less product. If you think about it, if you go in with a light foundation and you pat that into the skin, you're going to keep adding that foundation until you get to the coverage you desire. So I always think a medium coverage foundation is the best bet. I myself am going to be using the L'Oreal Infallible up to 24-hour fresh wear foundation. That's a pretty runny foundation, see? Now, if you're sitting there and you're kind of like, well, my foundation isn't nearly as runny as this foundation and I don't want to go out and buy a new foundation, don't worry. You can always work with what you got. My tip for you is to go ahead and put a pump of that foundation on the back of your hand because the warmth of your hand is really going to help to thin out that formula. Just put a pump on the back of your hand, let it sit, do something else. I don't really know, maybe fill in your eyebrows before then going ahead and applying this to your face. I also think it's really important to pick a foundation that meshes well with your skin. So if you're oily, pick a more mattifying foundation. If you are dry, then I would pick something that is hydrating or more of a satin type of finish. The best way to avoid patchiness in terms of actual foundation application is to use a damp beauty sponge. A few things here. One, when I say damp, you want to be able to squeeze the sponge and you don't want any water to come out of it. A good thing to do is to go ahead, run it under some water, squeeze out the excess water, and then if you have a clean towel, I would go ahead and put it in the towel and squeeze it like 2 times. If you leave too much water in your sponge, that is going to break up your foundation and it's going to make it look patchy and it's going to make it look cakey. Any sponge that's too stiff and won't absorb the foundation enough, it's not going to spread it out as nicely and it's not going to spread it out as evenly. So you don't need to splurge on a beauty blender, but just make sure that you're using a sponge that has give in it. So it's a really soft and porous sponge. Push this into the skin. And as you can see, I'm stamping this. I'm not swiping it and I'm only going to use what I need. So I'm really going to make sure this is blended out. Now, if you notice your foundation goes on really smooth in certain places and then really patchy and cakey in others, it might be because that section of your face has dry patches underneath it, or maybe you have acne scars. That's just the type of skin that isn't really going to absorb moisture as easily. So I would totally recommend mixing a little bit of your foundation on the back of your hand and then putting a hint of whatever oil it is that you use. I would mix a tiny, maybe like half a drop of that into your foundation. Apply that mixture only over top of your troubled areas. I don't apply foundation where I know I'm going to be going in with concealer. I don't apply foundation underneath my eyes, and I don't apply foundation in the crevices or the corners of my nose. By not putting foundation where you're going to put your concealer, again, you are minimizing the layer of product in those sections of your face. If you are someone that likes to apply his or her foundation with a brush, take a dense brush like this. You're going to pick up the foundation and you're going to do the same exact motion. You're going to do stippling, pressing motions with your brush. Anything that you go in with, I would highly recommend pressing it and pushing it into your skin. Honestly, whether it's liquid or powder, which we're about to get there. I would recommend using a thin concealer, something that is a little bit more liquidy. So I love the Tarte Shape Tape, but that can be a little bit on the thicker side. So I'm going to grab that on the pointier side of my sponge and I'm going to pack that underneath my eyes, but I'm not going to bring that too far down on the cheek. And again, I'm pressing it and pushing it into the skin. So if you apply it directly to the skin, I would just apply like that much, nothing more. Don't do like the whole triangle thing. That is just putting on too much product and it's going to cause cakiness in the end. Now, if you need a little extra coverage over pimples or somewhere else on your face, I'm going to recommend taking a little brush like this. And for this technique, I'm going to use my foundation just because this concealer is too light. So if you put a light concealer over a pimple, it's going to bring it forward. Think about, when you highlight something, if you highlight your cheek, you bring it forward. So I'm going to take a bit of my foundation and I'm going to pick it up with that brush and I'm going to put it right over that pimple and I'm going to let it sit there for a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing down here. And I got a little bit of discoloration on my chin, but see, I'm literally just pinpointing this where I need it. I'm not, adding too much product, any extra product to where I don't. And then once I've gone ahead and let that sit there for a couple moments, you can go ahead and take the warmth of your finger to just help blend that foundation, or ideally you would use a concealer that matches your foundation shade. A good rule of thumb, always apply creams before applying any kind of powder to your face. That could be the only issue that you're having. You could just be going in with a cream product, setting it with a powder, and then putting a cream product on top. Now, if you are someone personally that gets to this point in the makeup routine and everything looks flawless, everything looks perfect, everything is laying down really nicely, it's after this point where you go in with powder that things start to take a left turn. Go ahead and grab your setting spray. So I'm going to hold it pretty far. Now, I would give this between 2 and 5 minutes to really sink into the skin and dry, because if you go in with a translucent setting powder, which is what we're about to do next, and set an area of your face that's wet, it's going to be patchy. Just wait until that dampness subsides on your face. Look in the mirror. If you see that there's like glistening or your skin looks a little bit wet, then that means that your skin hasn't absorbed the spray and you're not ready to go ahead and set your makeup yet. Just take note of when your foundation starts to look weird. Now, if you're going in with foundation and concealer and right after that, so where we are right now, things start to look a little weird, then it's most likely your skincare routine, or you're picking a primer and or a foundation that isn't right for your skin type. On the flip side, you notice that the issue is after you apply powder blush, powder bronzer. The issue could be that your powder products are gripping too much onto your foundation. So what I would recommend is taking a translucent setting powder. Only use what you need. Tap off the excess, and I'm gonna pat my skin. So I'm just patting this in the areas where I really need to set my face. Take what's ever left on that brush and I'm just gonna stamp it over, again, pressing where I'm gonna go in with blush and bronzer. Powder on top of powder lays better than a powder on top of cream. Sometimes our bronzer just kind of hits a spot on our foundation, on our face that's a little bit too damp. And like anything, when you spray an eyeshadow brush to pick up more pigmentation, that section of your face is gonna have more pigmentation from that bronzer, that blush. So I'm just gonna go in with this bronzer in this RealHer palette on a big fluffy brush, and I'm gonna stamp that into my skin. I know that we're used to like swiping, because when you think about eyeshadow, when you blend out an eyeshadow, you kind of go back and forth and back and forth. You can blend out any kind of face product by just going over and over and over in a patting, stamping, pressing motion. You don't need to swipe. If you are someone that has large pores in this area or fine lines, any kind of texture in those areas, you could totally skip highlighting, but a lot of us like to highlight, and why should you have to skip out just because you have textured skin? There's really a way around everything. So what I would recommend is to find a highlighter that is very finely milled, does not have thick chunks of glitter in it. I'm going to be using this one from the RealHer Ultimate Glow Getter palette. So I'm going to use this one on a fluffy brush, pat it into my skin like this. So what that's going to do is it's kind of going to press it in between any texture that you have. I think this is a really good and helpful technique. And then once you have it packed into your skin, pick up a little bit more, and then you can go ahead and really brush that over the skin in that swiping motion. And see, it's going to give you a really blinding highlight. And I have a lot of fine lines there. I also have a zit right there as well, but you can't see it. It lays down really nice. It doesn't look patchy, and it definitely doesn't look textured. You just want to keep that on the highest points of your cheeks, because the lower you go, I find the more texture that you have. And then last but not least, this might be one of the most important steps. You're going to want to go ahead and set your face. And again, I'm going to be using the Morphe Continuous Setting Spray. And don't move your face too much after setting your makeup. If you move your face too much, it will settle into those fine lines. So try and just sit there for a minute and just let your face air out without making any facial expressions. All right, guys, and there you have it. Those are all of my tips and tricks on how to make sure your foundation stays put all day, doesn't look patchy. I really hope that this was helpful. If you did find it helpful, I would love it if you would give it a big thumbs up. If you did try any of these tips and tricks out and they worked for you, I would love it if you would come back. Let me know down below in the comments section. I love to hear that I'm helping you guys out in any way possible. I really want you sitting down to do your makeup to feel empowering and amazing, because each and every time I sit down to do my makeup, I just enjoy it so much, and I want each and every one of you to feel that same feeling. I don't want this to be frustrating. I don't want this to be disheartening. I want you guys to know that with practice and just a little bit of knowledge, you can really up and perfect your makeup game. Make sure that you subscribe and ring the bell before you leave. I had a wonderful time as always. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, Finders. Mwah.